Introduce our speaker for this evening, Steve from Nashville.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. Michael, thank you for chairing and the introduction. And Anthony, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here with you guys this evening. I really appreciate it. I've been in a reflective mood, not a melancholy mood, a very gratefully reflective mood, as often happens at the turn of the year. We're day at a time people, but it's still it's not lost on me when the calendar turns and I come into a new year, and there just typically something feels optimistic and kind of exciting and new about that for me. But it also has me kind of look and reflect back, and I've certainly been through some of that lately. And man, I'm just so grateful. It just dawns on me and is reinforced all the time how grateful I am to be here with you, to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. On this screen tonight, I guess there's 91 people here, but I've already seen a dozen or so people that I consider good friends and people that I love and care about, and how heartening is that. And so it's just a thrill for me to be here, and I appreciate that. Lest I forget to tell you, my sobriety date's June 30th, 1989, and my home group is the Recovery on the Road group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we meet on Wednesday evenings at 6:00, and we're meeting virtually as you guys are, and I will tell you, I'm grateful for these virtual platforms. I would much rather be with you in person, but odds of me being at this meeting in New Jersey probably would be pretty slim in a non-COVID world. So I'm grateful to have this chance to be with you, and I've got to visit with friends and go to meetings all over the country and all over the world, and that's been a wonderful. One of the blessings hidden in the burdens of this past 10 months or so. I like maybe many of you, I've maybe gone to more meetings since this has been going on and going virtually. And one of the reasons is because I have so many friends that are doing things around the country, and I get to visit them. And as I said, some of them are on here tonight. So I've been speaking quite a bit, and I'll be honest with you, even I'm kind of tired of listening to me, but I was invited here. But I will tell you that I've only got one thing of real value in Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe that is my story, using my story to talk about my experience with the information that I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. It is. Our 12th step says that having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And if I think, and I've heard people ask, well, what is the message? What is the message? And I think that the message for me is that I've had a spiritual awakening, and it's the result of these steps. And then what I get to do when I'm at my best is talk about my experience with those steps. Our book says if you're an alcoholic that wants to get over it, you may already be wondering, what do I have to do? There are some newer people on the meeting tonight, and you may have decided you want to get over it, whatever that looks like for you. And you may be wondering, what do I have to do? Well, here's the good news for you, and it's in two parts. The book, it says that's exactly what this book is about. But the second part is probably more important relative to my role, because it says, we will tell you what we have done. See, that one of the things I've been most grateful for in Alcoholics Anonymous, particularly early on, is people didn't spend a lot of time telling me what I should do. They shared with me what they had done and gave me that opportunity for identification in Alcoholics Anonymous, first with the problem And then hopefully with attraction rather than promotion, I would be drawn to what I saw or heard in you and from you. You know, again, for the newer people, and maybe any of us, but when I first got to AA, when I first reached a point, and I'll talk, my story typically is not a linear story. I try to tell it chronologically, but the truth is it's a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino movie with no time and space continuum. I think of something to say and say it, and hope that by the end of the hour, there have been a few stories told that tie together in some useful way. But but when I arrived at the conclusion that I needed to stop drinking, I need to not drink. I probably should not drink, which is different than not wanting to drink. But I arrived first at the decision and conclusion that I need to not drink. But I wasn't sure what AA had for me. So what I want to tell, particularly those of you who are perhaps uncertain or in that period of feeling your way into Alcoholics Anonymous, that looking back, I can tell you that I arrived at Alcoholics Anonymous hungry for something, hoping for something that I did not. There was something missing. I'm not sure. Listen, when I share with you tonight, I'm sharing with benefit of looking in the rearview mirror, and I can articulate a little more effectively looking back than I could going through it. Looking back, I know that I was thirsting for something. When Roland Hazard went to see Carl Jung, for those of you who are familiar with that story in our book, and over 30 years later, Bill Wilson wrote to Carl Jung, and Jung wrote back to Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson Carl Jung said of Roland Hazard, that he said, what I believe Mr. Hazard had at a low level was a spiritual thirst. In medieval language, a longing for a union with God. Now, that's the thirst that I believe I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous with, but I did not know it. So what I want to tell you, if you're uncertain and you're here in AA, that my thirst, my hunger was satiated. I have found that thing. And so, it's almost like if you're hungry tonight, if you're sitting there and go, you know what, I'm really hungry, but somebody says, well, what do you want? What shall we have? And you go, well, I don't know. I'm hungry, but I don't know what I'm hungry for. And one of your friends says, well, man, there's a great restaurant down the street. I've been there. The food is great. You're going to love it. And what I will share for those of you who are newer to Alcoholics Anonymous, the food is great. You're going to love it. Hang out with us. Spend some time. Go through the whole buffet. Have a little bit. It's an all-you-can-eat meal at Alcoholics Anonymous, an all-you-can-eat spiritual meal. You can go back for seconds. And the great news is, once you serve yourself, you can begin to serve others, and you will find that that's where the appetite is really filled. I told you I got here, or my sobriety date's June 30th, 1989. For me, that means the last time I had a drink or a drug was June the 29th of 1989. Now, I did not intend to go from June the 29th until tonight between drinks. There was no intention on my part on June the 29th of stopping drinking. But I was scheduled into a treatment facility on July the 1st of 1989. And scheduled is the appropriate word, because I was not going because I had had some epiphany. I was not going because I thought I needed or wanted to stop drinking. I knew I needed to do better. I knew I needed to drink less. I knew I needed to avoid some of the problems that my drinking was creating. But stopping drinking did not seem to me, it seemed like an over response to the problems I had. I was certainly not looking to find a design for living that that our 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous provide for me. I was scheduled into that treatment facility for alcohol-related problems. I had been convicted of my sixth DUI a year before. As a result of a plea bargain agreement, I'd been given some jail time. And some of that jail time was, they said they would count going to drug and alcohol residential treatment would peel off some of those days of jail. And to me, it sounded marginally better than jail. So I said, I'll go. And I had a year of probation to complete this treatment. And July the 1st of 89 was the day to go. So my wife and I went out with some friends on June the 29th. It wasn't even a particularly wild evening. The truth is, and some of my friends on here have heard me share this shameful and horrifying tidbit, but the last drink I ever had between that night and this was an amaretto on the rocks. And I'm here. Yeah, I saw a couple of sneers. Charity, I saw you down there. See, with 6 days, Charity's laughing at me. That's what way AA works, right? The new person just lets in, goes, amaretto, Jesus Christ, man. I got it, Chastity. It's shameful. The truth is, there's absolutely no AA street cred in drinking amaretto. But at least you now know for sure that I did not intend to stop drinking. That is not the way I would have gone down. If you had told me, Charity, that I could have one more drink, what will it be? I promise you, amaretto would not have made my top 10. But see, I wasn't intending to stop drinking. So my wife and I got up on June the 30th, and we spent that day with our daughter, Abby, who was 5 years old at the time. And this is where the story really takes a dark turn, because I spent my first day sober at Chuck E. Cheese. And we took Abby there, and I just beg of you, I'm not a tough guy, and this isn't a rough and tumble story, but do not spend your first day sober at Chuck E. Cheese. It was a hellish day at Chuck E. Cheese. First of all, as many of you know, it's unbelievably loud in there. And they are short and coming at you from every angle. And just as I was gathering my emotional balance, I saw a 6-foot mouse. And I turned to my wife, Connie. I said, baby, do you see the mouse? And she said she did. Well, we spent that day, the Saturday morning, July the 1st, my friend Ricky came by to pick me up to drive me off to this treatment facility. And Connie walked out with me to bid me farewell. And I will tell you that most of you, this is going to bring a tear to your eye, because most of you didn't get the kind of support that I got from my wife. Those of you, your friends, your family, your loved ones. Connie walked out front with me, and as I'm getting in that car to drive off, she said, no matter what, baby, don't stop drinking. She said, I don't know what you're going to be doing over there. I'm not sure. Don't you know what the spiel is going to be, but you go do your time and come on back. Now, I was just kidding with Connie before I came in here, and she said, please be sure and remember to tell them that I'm sober. And I'll tell you, Connie's sobriety date's 10 days after mine. And we just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary, and 31 of those has been sober. Now, even some of the sober ones, I will tell you, were really challenging in those first few years of sobriety, because we had to find each other again. I'll tell you, I'd met Connie. We'd been married 7 years at the time, 7.5. And we had met barely 8 years before, and we met when Connie came to Nashville, back to Nashville, though I hadn't known her when she lived there previously, after living in Lake Tahoe, where she had dealt baccarat and in a casino, and gotten married, and now gotten divorced. She's coming back to Nashville. She's freshly divorced. So she's got a pocket full of divorce money, and she's got a divorce pickup truck, and she's got a divorce 8-ball of cocaine. And I just fell head over heels for her. And we ran hard for a little while. We took a trip to Mexico. We drank something out of a coconut and ended up on a boat that they swear was in international waters. And an Austrian merchant marine read in Spanish what he swears was a wedding ceremony. Now, we don't speak Spanish, so we're not sure what we agreed to on that boat. But for 38 years, we've been arguing about it. I can promise you that the words love, honor and obey were not in there apparently, because we have ping ponged back and forth off that for these 31 years since then. But I will tell you that it's and Connie, man, she's a straight on board sponsoring big book solid AA member, and we are both just so grateful for that. And see, our lives, I got to tell you, we didn't expect that 31 years later, I might have thought at some point that I might stay sober, that I might not drink again. I don't know what I thought, but it wasn't on my radar when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous that 31 years later, I would be here with you guys tonight, not because I have to be, not because I need to be, but because I want to be. Now, let me be clear. I need to be, but I'm not here out of desperation. I'm not here out of fear of running from what my life used to be like. I'm here because I'm drawn to what my life is like today. I am much more drawn from the light than I am running from the fire. But I don't want anyone, especially you newer people, to misunderstand what I'm saying. I know I continue to need to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, but it is not a burden, it's a blessing. It is not doing time. It is being put in a position to embrace and love the life I have today. I'm active in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, there's people on here more active than me, but I mean, my life is built around the fact that I'm in AA. Now, not everybody does that, and not everybody needs to, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm telling you, that's where I'm at, and I love it, and I'm grateful for it. Because when I'm square, Charity at 6 days and Tom at 9, I think somebody else was at 28 days. I got to tell you, when I was there, and you guys probably wouldn't be here tonight if you hadn't made a decision that you need to not drink. But I was still pretty concerned about what life was going to look like. I need to not drink. But man, I thought we were going to spend an awful lot of time in AA not drinking. I mean, I thought not drinking was an actual activity in Alcoholics Anonymous. We would just get together and not drink. Would you look at him not drink over there? And look at the technique on that guy. He reached for it, pulled back. It looked like he was going to take it, but he didn't. I mean, I thought that, and we would talk each other out of a drink. That's what we'd do at these meetings. We'd get together, and it's going to be tough. And somebody might call and say, "Hey, Steve, man, I got tickets for the NFL championship game tomorrow between Buffalo and Kansas City, man. You want to go?" Man, I'd love to go, but I'm busy Sunday, man. I'll be home not drinking. Somebody said, "Don't drink even if your ass falls off." I'll be home not drinking, guarding my ass. I'm just not drinking. No matter what, I'm going to not drink. And it's going to be kind of pitiful. I mean, I know it's going to be a sad life. I get it. That's going to be full of self-sacrifice. That's the kind of guy I am. I'm quitting for others. I'm through hurting people. But I'm going to not drink, and it's going to take all the willpower I have. And life is going to be dull and not much fun. But I'm going to do it. And I could tell you my life, nothing could be further from the truth. And the vast majority of people on this meeting tonight have had and are having that same experience. My life, it didn't end when I stopped drinking. I didn't know how small my life had become. See, I thought when I got to AA, it was going to be all about what I can't do, where I can't go, who I can't hang out with. My life's about to get really small, really boring. But again, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I know I need to. But man, my life is opened up, and I know so many other people in this meeting tonight who are living big lives. when you get to AA, and when they first said to a guy like me, the first time I heard them say, we don't drink a day at a time, I thought, Jesus, this is going to be a long life. A day at a time sounded like such a, like such a tough thing. Like it sounded like pain tolerance. Hey, can you just not drink today? Can you hold on, kid? I know it's going to be uncomfortable. I know it's going to, but can you just not drink and get back tomorrow? Hang in there. And I got to tell you, there certainly is some of that for some of us. But see, that thing takes a shift as well over time. At least it has for me. That not drinking a day at a time. See, I think, and that, trying to get through my life a day at a time turns into being able to truly live in this day, truly be able to be in this day, embrace it, get the most of it. That's what's available for me and for you, for my life to open up and not continually be waiting to have a good day. I don't know if any of you guys are like me, but I look back and I see how much time I spent getting ready to have a good day. When this happens, or when that happens, or when I act better, when they act better, when I get more money, when the relationship works out, when my kid acts like she's supposed to act, when circumstances all conspire in such a way to finally give me a good day. And in fact, what I will tell you is what Alcoholics Anonymous certainly broadens the target for me to be able to have a good day. I know Jimmy and Mary Beth have heard this story 100 times, and I hadn't been telling it much lately, but it just showed up. And it's about, see, I realize how many demands I've been making on life. And maybe you're showing up here, maybe newly sober, maybe you've been here a long time. It still happens to me that I still keep needing something to happen, or needing something a particular way, or thinking I do. And see, once I describe something, once I identify something that must happen or must not happen, then I'm held hostage to that. Now that becomes the requirement for me to be okay. And I'm going to tell you a little Zen story now. I was at an AA conference in Toronto about 15, 16 years ago now. And I was speaking at this thing, and we broke for lunch. And when we broke for lunch, I'm sitting at a table with about 10 people. It was one of those round table with 10 of us, and they came to take our order. And I ordered a cheeseburger. And the guy next to me, I noticed, ordered a club sandwich. And then they went around and took the other orders. I didn't hear them all. A little while later, they brought our food back, and they gave me a cheeseburger. And they gave the guy next to me a cheeseburger. And he started eating this cheeseburger. And I looked at him and I said, man, I thought you ordered a club sandwich. And listen to what he said. This is remarkable. He said, I did, but they brought me a cheeseburger. And that's all. That's the end of the story primarily. Except I said, brother, you don't have to live like that. We can get you a club sandwich. And I stood up, and I'm trying to get, the waiter back over, and I'm ready to get the assistant manager. And we might go all the way to the top if necessary. Because I said, we can right this horrible wrong. We can get you a club sandwich. And he's going, Steve, but listen, man, I'm cool. I'm good with the cheeseburger. And I said, no, brother, you shouldn't have to suffer this indignation. We're getting you a club sandwich. And he said, no, man, I'm good. And understand, he wasn't just eating the damned old cheeseburger because that's what life had served him. He was fine with the cheeseburger. And see, what I realized, and wasn't his life better off because he was okay with the cheeseburger. Now, what I tell you is, metaphorically speaking, I regularly go through life ordering a club sandwich and getting a cheeseburger, and it ain't okay. I go through life waiting for the world to get my order right, and I haven't even placed my order. See, and I begin to realize that I am walking around in this world requiring so much of other people to anticipate my particular need for me to be okay. I'm not consciously doing it. I'm doing that because I'm spiritually asleep. And these 12 steps are put in place to spiritually awaken me, to free me of the bondage of self, which is what holds me hostage, which is what plants those old and false ideas in my head. But I digress. Let's back up and get in that car heading over to the treatment facility. My buddy Ricky takes me over there, and I go in there, and man, the very first thing they do is they're going to examine my relationship with alcohol. Now, you guys know that what they were doing was giving me an assessment, but it felt like a test to me. And they asked me a lot of questions, and assessments today are a little more clinical in nature. They're a little more driven toward the right level of care, toward insurance and your payer being able to give you residential days or outpatient days or whatever the heck it might be. But then they had a test that was a little bit more like Jeff Foxworthy's "You Might Be a Redneck If." And they asked questions like, they had a whole psychosocial workup and a bunch of stuff, but there was one section of the assessment that was asking me about my drinking. And it said, have you ever drank in the morning? Have you ever drank alone? Have you ever had a blackout? Have you ever had a DUI? Now listen to me. The first three words, have you ever? Ever. They said that means even once, and even with a really good reason. Have you ever had trouble at home because of drinking? Have you ever had trouble at work because of drinking? 30, have you ever questions? And you know that they just have check yes or check no to what I clearly contend are clearly essay questions. These are questions that beg for an explanation. These are questions that require some context. These are questions that have a backstory. And how can you, we kind of laugh on here, and I get it. I can see now looking back, I can see the absurdity of my agonizing over how to answer these questions. But see, I know they're going to draw conclusions about me. By definition, an assessment means they're going to assess me based on how I check these boxes. And I honestly couldn't imagine them doing that without me giving them a little more information. And part of the deal hell, I had questions about the questions. Have you ever drank in the morning? I said, be specific by what you mean by morning. And because, see, part of my problem is I think I know what they're asking me. See, I think they're asking me if I'm that guy that's got to wake up and got a half pint on the nightstand at 4 a.m. and take a pull off of it to fight off the shakes or the sweats and stumble into the bathroom and maybe be able to start moving toward my day. And I've done that a few times, but not so often I'm going to check it on this test. And but I thought to myself, I said, what if I'm out at a very nice establishment at 2 a.m. At last call? Is that morning drinking? And if I don't explain the difference to you, you might think I'm pitiful half pint on the nightstand guy rather than cool out at the club guy. And to be fair, I was never cool out at the club guy. I was old guy hanging out at the club way too long guy. But and then they go, hey man, have you ever drank alone? I said, yes, but they left. We started together. Did you ever just look around and go, where'd everybody go? It was a party just a little while ago. But again, I think I know what they're asking me. I think they're asking me if I'm that guy that's got to go home and close the door, pull the shades, dim the lights. It used to be unplug the phone, now put it on silent or vibrate and hide in isolation, drink in isolation, hiding from the world. And you can bet I did that a number of times, but not so often I'm going to let them know. But there's another kind of alone drinking that I did. And maybe I'm finding the more I tell the story that I'm not alone here, but I'm a guy that had to drink to go drinking, so I'm a drink to go drinking kind of guy, right? And I got to tell you, I'm taking a little informal survey. You guys don't have to answer, but do you think drinking to go drinking is actually drinking, or is that like stretching before exercising? Is that more a preparatory event? Now, I, to be fair, what I've discovered is that UAAs are pretty adamant about that total abstinence thing. So apparently it's drinking. But see, I needed to drink to go drinking. And our book talks about alcohol being a social lubricant. And man, I get that. I mean, it's like oiling up. And once I'm oiled up, I can move easily amongst you. I am now, I am lubricated. I can slide in all the cracks. I can be comfortable out in the world. Now, I will tell you, without that social lubricant, I am ill at ease. I am self-conscious. I'm insecure. I'm afraid. And nobody would have described me that way. That's how I felt. But if I had to go into those same circumstances stone sober, I would have done so and did so. You know, I know what it's like to go into a work situation or a family situation or a social situation and stand outside of a door and steel myself up to then go in and act like the dancing bear, to show up and walk through that door and act like a guy would act if he were comfortable, if he were personable, if he were outgoing, if he were gregarious. I know what it's like to pretend to be. And I will tell you that acting is exhausting on me. Acting is hard work. I don't know if you know some actors. I know some, and it's hard work. It's emotionally draining to act. And I'm living my life acting the vast majority of the time. And alcohol, when I pour some alcohol on that, it made life a little bit easier. I tried to tell you a little bit about my relationship with alcohol without telling a ton of drunk stories. And that last part is a little bit about the unmanageability of my life, right? That unmanageability, I believe that second half of the first step, my life had become unmanageable. For me, that's how I feel sober. That's not the mess I created drinking. That's not the fact that Connie's pissed at me, that my mortgage is behind, that I'm in trouble at work, that I'm not a good father to my daughter. Those things aren't the unmanageability. That's the alcoholic chaos of my life. But the unmanageability for me was why at 2:00 in the afternoon, stone sober, with a pretty good job, with a wife that loved me, with a kid that loved me, with a circumstantially life that looked okay. Why do I feel the way that I feel? And I couldn't have described that to you. You know, there's a great line in back in A Vision for You describing Dr. Bob. And it says he was painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, for he did not yet fully understand what it meant to be alcoholic. And boy, I can tell you that I was painfully aware of feeling somehow abnormal. I don't know how abnormal I actually am. I just know I feel abnormal, and it's probably the feeling that is what is abnormal. Right? I'm not that different than most people, but I feel, and what I believe that is for me, and what I believe, I'm going to tell you what I think that problem is, and I'm going to tell you what I believe that solution has been for me. I believe that problem is the problem that Chuck Chamberlain talks about when he says that our single problem is a conscious separation from man and God. What makes me feel painfully somehow different is that there's something between me and you, and there's something between me and God. When I find that in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe that to be the bondage of self. I believe that to be that self, that authentic me is blocked off by this defective character that I have. And I know I've got a defective character because it creates defects. And the defects are described in a variety of different ways, but at least one of them is the seven deadly sins. And so I seem to be held hostage by fear, by pride, by lust, by envy, by jealousy, by sloth, by those things that I fall prey to, that have me act counter to who I am deep inside. And those are the things that are blocking me off. Our book says from the sunlight of the Spirit. That's why I embark on the inventory process, to face and be rid of those things in myself that have been blocking me. The book Alcoholics Anonymous tells me that the problems of the alcoholic arise from within. So was huge news for me. And in fact, I'm 31 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've only begun to believe this at various levels or accept it at various levels over those 31 years. But my current belief is that all my problems are internal. They're all internal, not external. You know, there's a great story, and most of you've read it in Bill's story, where he talks about having a moment in front of Winchester Cathedral. And he says this great sense of calm came over him. And it says, for a brief moment, I both wanted and needed God. And then he goes on to say, but these were quickly blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. All my problem is my inability to accept the external circumstances as they are. And I'm not asking anybody to accept an untenable, abusive type situation. That's not what I'm talking about. But I will tell you, I got to be okay when my daughter acts in a way that I wish she would do something different. I mean, I don't have to be okay. I'd rather be okay, and it's available to me. I want to find that peace of mind. And if peace of mind is my goal, then I believe, like Dr. Paul said, and many other spiritual books that I read imply, that acceptance is the answer. That this peace of mind comes with an internal condition rather than external. But first, I had to come out of that treatment center, and to be honest with you, I just decided I'm still at the point where I just need to not drink, and so I'm going to try to not drink, and AA is how I'm going to try to do it. And so I began to go to AA meetings there, and after I got out of treatment in August of 1989, I got a sponsor. I was loving going to AA meetings. I mean, I loved it. I mean, you guys are fascinating people to be around. I mean, even this group tonight, I can only see 25 on my screen, but I promise you, this could be an audience at the Jerry Springer show. This is an absolutely eclectic crowd that I love hanging out with. A couple of you could be Jerry Springer guests. But and that's what AA has been like, man. It's just, you got these fascinating stories, and most of them are even true. And you're blowing my, and it wasn't even just talking about your drinking, but when you guys began to talk about how you felt, when you began to talk about that unmanageability, however you chose to articulate it, man, that's when you brought me in. And I'm loving going to these meetings. And I come home, Connie's sobriety date is 10 days after mine, but she was 4 years later before coming to AA. And she said she would have got to AA a lot sooner if I had not been so helpful to her. But I would come home and I would say, man, I said, the meeting's unbelievable. You should hear what these people say. You should have heard the speaker tonight. And she said, well, what did he say? And I go, I don't know. I couldn't remember any of the information. But what I had was an experience. You know, the nicest compliment I've ever received about an AA talk was about 13 years ago in Palm Springs, and I was having breakfast the morning after I'd given a talk. And a longtime sober guy, a guy that's become a friend of mine now, but I'd never met him before, he came by my breakfast table and he said, Steve, he said, I enjoyed that talk last night. He said, I don't remember the words to the song, but I sure did like the music. And man, that's what's been happening for me in AA. We speak the language of the heart. And what I mean by that, at least what I mean by that, doesn't mean that's always soft and sweet and music playing in the background. It means that the information is less important than the fact that it resonates with me at somewhere other than academically. This isn't an academic program. This is a spiritual, experiential program. This is where I'm looking to be changed, not learn my way out of my alcoholism. What I have to do, what's available to me is I'm a guy that can get, I'm a big book study guy. I can parse that big book. If we stay on here much longer tonight, I will tell you what Bill meant to say. But in fact, what I want to try to avoid doing is turning this into an academic exercise. Some of you guys, some of you really new people, and some of you folks that have been coming around a long time, when you go to the meeting and you're sitting in your meeting and that man or woman comes through that has been one of those people for you, that when they show up at the meeting, you just feel better. You're hoping that they're going to be there this week. And you might not even know them well. They just give you a sense of calm, a sense that everything's going to be all right. Now, that's not information. That's not because they just broke a step down for you. It's because you look there and as our book says, everything about their comportment indicates that this is a man of substance or a woman of substance. I see something that I can't describe that I'm absolutely drawn to. And man, that's been my experience. And now some of those people have become my dearest friends. And that will happen for you if it hasn't happened yet. In fact, if you've got that person, if there are those people, when you're in that meeting, what I want to encourage you to do, go over and talk to them. Go over at the end of the meeting and say, man, I'm Steve, I'm Bob, I'm Charity. And man, I loved what you said, or it's comforting to me to see you here. Thank you. Jump be a part of this thing because that we want you to. And I'll tell you another story that I think will illustrate what kept me in that bind. I told you that in that August and September of 1989, I'm going to meetings and I'm loving them. But I'm telling you, I'm barely making it for the a serenity prayer, and I'm out right after the Lord's Prayer. And I really didn't understand. I was sitting in a Saturday lunchtime meeting, 11:30 meeting down at the 202 Club here in Nashville. And after the meeting, and I noticed this chatter before the meeting. When you get to the meeting early, you hear that chatter before the meeting. And my friend Scott calls that the music of Alcoholics Anonymous. But you hear that chatter, and I realized that some of these people were talking to each other between meetings. That blew my mind. I had no idea people were establishing relationships in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I thought you just went home. And somebody said after the meeting, they said, we're all going to lunch. Who wants to go? And I desperately wanted to go. So after the meeting, they said what restaurant they were going to. So after the meeting, I got in my car and I headed over there. And I got about halfway to the restaurant and I turned and went home. I couldn't go. The next week, I did the same thing. I wanted to go. I head over there, but I just couldn't go. I was unwilling to have what I viewed as a potential awkward moment, a potential embarrassing moment. I've got this hyper self-consciousness that is the root of my problem. This self-centered fear that is the root of my problem. That is what the 12 steps are ultimately going to help treat. And that's what I've been pouring alcohol on before. And once I got as far as all the way to the restaurant, but some of them were milling around outside, right? Well, I can't run the gauntlet in there, because I don't know what to say to them. So then, and my biggest fear was that I would walk in that restaurant and there would already be 6 people sitting at a table for 6. And I wouldn't know whether to pull up the 7th chair. I wouldn't know whether they really meant me. I wouldn't even know if they even really remembered me. I wouldn't know, and I just wouldn't. So instead of risk that, because that's the self-centered fear I've got, I'll just not go. And I said, all I needed was a couple of people to come up to me after the meeting and go, Steve, some of us have been talking, and man, we really want you to go to lunch with us. And we're just arguing over who gets to sit with you. And if they had done that, then I would have gone and I would have been the head of the table. Because if you remove all the obstacles from me, see, it's easy for me to come talk to you at this meeting tonight. You know why? I was invited. But I'm still a guy that can show up someplace and have to really check myself if I'm willing to risk what I view. My pride and my ego show up, and you know, my pride and my ego, they come dressed as my friends, and like the government say, we're here to help, but they are not. My pride and my ego say, you can't let them see this, you can't say that, you can't be embarrassed. And my pride and my ego, which seem like they are protecting me, are the very things that are blocking me from connecting with you and connecting with God. Each of our 12 steps is an exercise in ego deflation, which begins to make me freer to just be me. I got to tell you, one of the biggest discoveries, most important discoveries of my life, and it took is that I am just barely average. I'm a barely average guy, and I'm pretty comfortable being barely average. You know, there's something comforting about that, and I don't mean that in a false humility way. Truth is, I'm looking at this crowd. Y'all are not that sharp. You know what I mean? As a collective, we're pretty average folks. And sometimes you have heard somebody say at one time or another, if you've been coming around, that AA is a simple program for complicated people. And I will tell you, I do not believe that's true. I think AA is a simple program for simple people who think they're complicated. And I'm the guy that will complicate things, right? I'm just a regular guy. That's really good news. There's no Mensa class in AA. There's no honors group in AA. We don't get moved to a different room. We all hang out together. These are horizontal, not vertical relationships. That's good news. We walk hand in hand with each other. That's good news. You know, I'm going to close now. There's a ton of stuff I didn't talk about. I wish I had. There's a ton of stuff I did talk about. You wish I hadn't, but we're stuck with the talk I gave. And, but I'm going to end by saying that here, but at 5 minutes, I think here, even when I'm new in AA and loving AA, I finally saw the line in our book that says, if I'm an alcoholic, and by now I am pleading guilty to the charge. If I'm alcoholic, I may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. Now that was bad news to me when I heard it. Number one, I didn't believe in a spiritual experience. I didn't know if I was capable of having one. I didn't know what one looked like. I didn't know what it took to get one. All of that made me uncomfortable. I wouldn't get in the circle at the end of meetings and hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer. I took my big book the first year I was sober, and everywhere it said spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, I blacked it out with a marker. Thank goodness my sponsor took me to the back of the book to the Appendix 2 on spiritual experience, and he helped me find language that was more accessible to me at the time. And that language, it talked about a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. And so everywhere my book said spiritual experience, I put personality change, because I was willing to have a personality change long before I was willing to have a spiritual experience. And my sponsor, Frank, said, Steve, I don't care what you call it. I want you to have it. He said, you're getting hung up on language, and I want you to have an experience. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And Frank would hardly ever quote Shakespeare. I got to stop and tell you that today is the 23rd of January. The 15th of January, this last week, was 13 years since that sponsor, Frank, passed away. And boy, I just feel so fortunate to have had 18 years with him in my life and in my sobriety. But he said, Steve-O, just have the experience. Just let go of your prejudice. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm encouraging you to take these actions and see what your experience is. Don't not take the actions because you say you don't believe in the experience. I'm going to go back to that restaurant. On that buffet in that restaurant, there's something that you pass by, and you got a friend with you that says, aren't you going to have any of the broccoli or the fried chicken or the chicken livers or the sushi? And all of us have got different, different places where and I go, no, man, no, I don't. That stuff's terrible. Yeah. Have you ever had any? No, but I know it's terrible and it smells bad. Well, try some. And if you're new here, the only thing I'd say, look, the steps might not look, these steps do not look like they're going to bring about the desired result. In fact, they seem unattached to the problem I showed up with, my view of the problem I showed up with. But I just want to encourage anybody that hasn't yet or isn't fully engaged in that process, drop those old ideas and jump in. Be a part of it. There's a much longer, or you won't be surprised, I have a much longer story I could tell, but there's a much longer version of my evolution with this relationship with a higher power. But I will sum it up as I end here with the short poem that a friend of mine in Nashville, Mo H. When I told you guys you've got that guy in your group that comes in and you just feel better. When I was newly sober, Mo was one of those guys for me. I didn't know him at the time. But I would find myself going to the meeting and hoping he would be there and hoping he would share because I felt better after he shared. And every time after he shared, he would end with the verse to a poem. And when Mo came down with cancer in 2003, my friend Jerry and I went to have breakfast with him, and we knew that his time was short. And I asked him that morning, Mo, would you mind if when I get a chance to share my story, I end with that poem? I said, it'll help me remember you, but in the truest sense of AA, it will help me pass on what you passed on to me and so many others. And he said, he's a little embarrassed. And he said, oh, Steve, if you think it'll help another drunk. Because see, Mo loved drunks more than anybody I've ever known. A lot of us love Alcoholics Anonymous. But after we're sober for a little while, we don't care too much for drunks. Which seems like kind of, they'll screw up a meeting and, they don't know when they're in my chair. They'll get up in the middle of the meeting. But Mo loved the drunk. He loved the guy that struggled in and out of AA. And he said, oh, Steve, if you think it'll help another drunk. And I will tell you, since October of 2003 until tonight, I've had the chance to say that poem to literally thousands of people. And it's always helped another drunk. Because I'm the drunk, it always helps. But it said, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul eluded me. But I sought my fellow man and found all three. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous has been for me. That's what that connection to a higher power is for me. The way I connect to my God is to connect with you. You invite me here tonight and give me a chance to share myself with you. You pretend to listen for about 50 minutes. What happens is this power shows up in a way that I can't define or comprehend. It has made it unnecessary for me to take a drink since June the 29th of 1989. And for the vast majority of that time, when I'm willing and surrendered, it has provided me a life that is happily and usefully whole. And I'm so grateful to be here tonight. Anthony, thanks for the invitation. Michael, thank you for chairing the meeting.